Have you ever really looked at a leaf? I mean, really looked. It might seem simple, but what's going on inside? Well, it's basically one of the most sophisticated factories on the entire planet. So today, we're going to go inside this incredible green machine. All right, so here it is. This little green oval is the star of our show, the chloroplast. And believe it or not, this tiny microscopic engine is what powers, well, pretty much all life on Earth. So the big question is, how on earth does it turn a sunbeam into life itself? Let's break it down. The best way to wrap our heads around this is to think of the chloroplast as a tiny, super efficient food factory. It takes in raw materials, right? And then it just churns out the products that both the plant and, honestly, we need to survive. Yeah, and here's the really wild part. This is not just any old factory. Its whole job, its entire reason for being, is to perform what feels like actual magic. It takes the energy from sunlight and turns it into tangible chemical energy in the form of sugar. It makes food. Okay, so like any factory, you need your raw materials, right? This one has three main ingredients. First, you need a power source, and that's sunlight, of course. Then you need water, H2O. And finally, you need carbon dioxide, CO2, which it just pulls right out of the air. Now, this whole process basically happens in two big phases. Let's talk about phase one. This is all about grabbing that energy from the sun. You can think of it as firing up the generators for the whole factory. Got to get the power on before you can make anything. So, if you look inside the chloroplast, you see these things that look like stacks of green pancakes. Those are called thylakoids. And a great way to think of them is as the factory's solar panels. This is ground zero for capturing sunlight. So, how do they work? Well, it's a pretty neat little process. First, boom, sunlight gets absorbed. The energy from that sunlight is then used to literally rip water molecules apart. When that happens, two things are created. You get this high energy fuel called ATP, and you get a byproduct that we're all pretty fond of, oxygen. Now, what's really important to get here is that this first stage, it doesn't actually make any food. Not yet. Its whole job is just to create that portable chemical fuel that's going to power the second, and arguably the most important part of the process. And that fuel, it's a molecule called ATP. The best analogy for it is a tiny rechargeable battery. It gets all charged up with energy during this first phase, and its only job is to carry that power over to the factory's main assembly line. All right, so now we're ready for phase two. The batteries are charged up, the power is on, and the factory is ready to do its real job, build the sugar. This is where the magic really happens. And where does this happen? Well, it all goes down in the space around those solar panel stacks we talked about. It's this fluid-filled area called the stroma. Just think of it as the main factory floor. This is where the big assembly line, known as the Calvin cycle, gets to work. And this assembly line is pretty straightforward, really. First, it pulls in carbon dioxide from the air. Next, it uses the power from those ATP batteries we just charged to run the whole cycle. And then, after a bunch of clever chemical reactions, it takes those carbon atoms and builds them into the final product, sugar. So after all of that, capturing sunlight, charging batteries, running an assembly line, what do we actually get out of it? Well, the stuff this factory produces is, and I'm not exaggerating, the engine that runs our entire planet. It really boils down to two main products, and both are absolutely crucial. You've got the sugars, which is the food the plant needs for itself, to grow and live. And then you've got that byproduct from the first phase, oxygen. That just gets released, and it happens to be the air that pretty much everything, including you and me, needs to breathe. I mean, just take a second to let that sink in. It's incredible, right? This one little factory, copied billions and billions of times in every leaf on Earth, is responsible for both our food and our air. Just wow. It's this perfect, tiny system that literally powers our whole world. And it all starts at this microscopic level, which, leaves us with a pretty heavy question to think about. What would happen if these little green factories just stopped?